Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Paul, Ian, Bill, hello. I'm Lisa. John, can someone unmute is everyone hearing me okay? And okay, John, we could hear you too.
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. That's our sound check for tonight then, thank you. All right, we're waiting on Robbie to arrive, which should be any minute now, and other folks to join. Don. Did I say Robbie? Don. I'm so used to. Hi, Rainey. Welcome.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Got a full house,
Full house tonight.
You know what? When Buddha taught a gorgeous peak, you ever heard of that place? Gorgeous peak, Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. He was a gorgeous peak in India. I've been there actually. I've been at gorgeous peak in India. And you look out, it's like, it's just rocks, and there's nothing down there. Apparently, there were thousands and thousands, maybe millions of spirits that were there listening to teachings. So I don't know how many people, but there are a lot of spirits. So I'm going to go with that. There's not a lot of people here, but there's a lot of spirits.
A lot of spirits.
Very common out of ourselves. Sure, there's many beings here, many of grains, sayings, and engages.
Yeah, I mean, these chairs, they're stacked. You know, they're sitting in each other's laps right here. It works for me. Anyway. So discovering Buddhism. So this is crowd knows everything about three principles. How are you, Chris?
Okay, everyone, Don is here and getting logged on, getting settled. Hi, Rebecca, John. We'll be starting in just a few seconds, I presume.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, I found something that I actually treasure. So back in the day, when Lama Yeshe, most people don't know him, but I was fortunate enough to have met him. And back in the day, I wanted to. This is like 1980, something. That's how old I am. Anyway, so I asked him, because I was living in Birmingham, Alabama. Talk about the Bible Belt. That was me, right in the middle of the Bible Belt. In fact, the Ku Klux Klan, their hangout was Coleman, Alabama, which is just about 30 minutes north of Birmingham. So anyway, I was a little bit nervous about teaching Buddhism, but I told him yesterday, I said, I want to teach a class in, I don't know, I said, I'm just going to read my notes, but I want to teach some sort of meditation class because there's nobody here. There are no Buddhists in Birmingham. So Lama Yeshe sent me a letter, and it was a good, it's very cryptic, but it kind of, his point of view about teaching the Dharma. So this was August the 2nd, 1980. He said, obviously somebody else wrote it, but he said, congratulations on giving course. Should be divine pride and feel fortunate. So divine pride means to try to remember, to have a good self-image. Don't think of yourself as being limited in a way, but, so Tantra is a way, it's something we talk about in Tantra, is divine pride. And feel fortunate to get this, to give teachings to others which American people so badly need. That's pretty right on. He said, Buddhist education offers American heart, warm and blissful, rather than empty, worthless life. That's pretty good. Buddhist education offers American heart, warm and blissful, rather than empty and worthless life. And then to sort of reassure me a little bit, he said, just giving encouragement, a life worthwhile and enough. So that's what I'm here to give, a little encouragement. That's my game plan anyway. So when the topic is the presenting the path, there's just so many different ways to go about it. But let's start out with like I did last time. I don't think we do this practice enough here, the Tonglen practice. Remember we did that last time? I think it is the most beautiful practice in all of Buddhism. And we don't do it at all, hardly ever. Don't ever, in retreat and stuff like that, we don't do it. If you ever do some people have done tantric retreats, right? John, did you do, did you do now, when y'all were doing the mantra, did you have a visualization to do with it? What was the visualization? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Geshe Sampa.
He said to imagine that she's right there in front of you, and then that was the first thing. You were having a conversation with her. That was what we did. So it was very, that was just his suggestions to us to make it before we began to like merge with her.
Right.
It wasn't like
There was not an elaborate visualization though, right?
going through.
Yeah. Well, in at least in Hajj Yoga Tantra, the visualization is Tonglen. Yeah. Yeah, you're emanating from your heart countless Buddhas who then go to universal living beings and take and provide them with whatever's their temporal needs are, and then their whatever's wanted and needed, and then guiding them all the way to supreme enlightenment. You imagine that universal living beings become enlightened, and then you breathe them back into your heart. But it's not like taking on suffering, because they're now Buddhists, but you absorb them back into your heart. So with exhalation, you breathe out these countless Buddhas, and you bring them back into your heart. So there's always this expansion and like that. So Tonglen's about. Remember, we talked about how it's about. It's translated as giving and taking, although a lot of Tibetan lamas will say, and I take a little issue with this because in the Guru Puja it actually talks this way too in the commentary. It's like you give first, and then you take second. But a lot of the Tibetan lamas say, well, if there's suffering, you should take on the suffering first and then give them happiness second. But why would you take suffering from somebody you hated? So I think you have to cultivate at least a sense of equanimity before you even start the practice, right? Because we're working to develop compassion and loving kindness for universal living beings. But then you've got to love them first before you want to take compassion. In other words, you have to feel connected, or a sense of warmth. The warmer you feel towards somebody, the more powerful your compassion will be, right? Like for a parent for their child. I mean, what could be worse than to see your child suffer? So you want to take their suffering on in the same way. So I think, again, going back, Tonglen means giving and taking. So we imagine giving from our heart, in the form of white light. And you can imagine it going out both nostrils and in both nostrils, but the teachings often say imagine going out of your right nostril this white light that symbolizes all of your roots of virtue, everything positive that you have, that you can imagine actually. And you imagine that, and that's going out, and you can start with yourself, which is always a good idea, but then you can expand to other people, friends, then neutral people, then people you feel aversion toward. And then I don't actually find it helpful, I will say it's helpful, but it's not, to think of everybody. Like when I think of strangers or people like that, that doesn't evoke any warm feelings in my heart. It just shows you the limitations of my practice. But particularly people that I dislike, that's a hard one, to develop compassion for people that you don't even know or dislike. And the vast majority of people are ones that we don't know. So in Tonglen, it's kind of important to have equanimity as the basis. And then you start out with yourself and you breathe out this white light, which symbolizes everything. And then along with that light, you can say silently to yourself, particularly, let's say you're working with yourself, but a visualized image of yourself, the level of your forehead, a body length in front, like a hologram, and you're breathing out this white light, and you're wishing, may I have happiness and its causes. May I have happiness and its causes. And you imagine, it's real important that there be some feeling with those words, right? So you imagine that you're giving yourself whatever you want and need, all the way up to having the teachings and the experience, the realizations of the path, all the way to supreme enlightenment. That's really what you want. And, like the ultimate satisfaction and bliss and joy is what we all want. And then you imagine, the suffering in the form of black smoke that you've experienced, and particularly the suffering that you will experience. You can imagine that in the form of black smoke, and that sort of rises above your body, and you breathe that slowly. It doesn't have to come in one breath. It can come in multiple breaths. And you get that black smoke, which forms like this orb of some really heavy darkness right at your left nostril. And then as you breathe that in, it becomes like a bolt of lightning, and it strikes at this rocky mountain at our heart that's like the Rocky Mountain of self-cherishing. And it completely explodes it, like, I think Lama may have used the word like an atomic bomb or something, but it's, that image may be too tough. But anyway, it just explodes this Rocky Mountain of self-cherishing and releases, of this blissful experience of happiness and joy that fills our body. Once our self-cherishing's gone, that's what's there, is all the positive stuff. So imagine as we breathe out, may I be free, may I have happiness and the causes of happiness. And as we breathe in, we're imagining, may I be free of suffering and its causes, coming in the left nostril. Okay? So I breathe out, may I have happiness and its causes, that's love. And may I breathe in, as we breathe in, may I be free of suffering and its causes, that's compassion. All right? And then we can begin to work with the people that we already feel close to. You could spend hours doing this practice, but the people that you already feel close to, I do this with my daughters sometimes, may they be happy and have its causes. And then I know what kind of ways that they struggle, and I imagine that, may they be free of suffering and its causes. And again, each time their negativity, their suffering comes into my heart, destroying my self-cherishing and completely liberating me from that, and I'm filled with joy and happiness like that, and white light. And then it's that white light that we give away. And then again, you can expand it. Even they say, Lama talks about like working with the beings in the different realms, like the God realms and the particularly the joyless realms, like the hell realm, working with all the different realms of existence that Buddhist cosmology talks about, is a very powerful way. Over time, we're planting the seeds. We had one lady, I remember one lady that came, I think she was a psychotherapist, and I kind of shocked her when I said this, but we were talking about Tonglen, and she said, well, she was a little bit worried about getting sick, but imagining taking on the suffering of other people, she might get sick. And and I remember there was a Tibetan Lama. I heard this story. He was in Boston or something like that, and he said that he was talking about this teaching, and somebody, said, well, what if I, imagine taking on the cancer of somebody else, and I get the cancer? And he said, well, that would just be wonderful. How, that'd be incredible that you could actually take somebody else's cancer on, that would be wonderful. Because that would, obviously, that's not something that ordinary people would be able to do anyway. So what we're trying to do is cultivate love and just spontaneously cultivate love and compassion. We're not at the level where we have that kind of power and karmic and karmic connection with anybody to actually be able to do that. So it's not like we're going to get sick by taking on other people's suffering, but it is a way. It's actually the last thing that our ego wants to do, isn't it? Is take on other people's suffering, or any suffering for that matter. So it's a very powerful way. It's a big antidote to egocentricity. And that's what happens when that suffering, we imagine it coming in to our heart, it destroys the self-cherishing egocentric mind. And we're liberated. And then again, we practice it. So we'll do this. Yeah, go ahead. What was the question?
It wasn't that he was saying, even at the highest levels of the practice, even the person that has been practicing it for the longest can really truly take on someone's cancer. But what I'm understanding it to be is, we're not taking it on to hold it there. We're taking it on and it's immediately transmuted to love.
Yeah.
Either way, even if we did have the highest capacity to take somebody else's cancer,
Exactly.
immediately transmitted or dissolved into love, and it wouldn't really hold there anyway.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because as soon as that negativity comes in, it goes right to our heart and destroys self-cherishing, so we don't get sick. But anyway, it was interesting that the Tibetan Lama's point of view was, wow, if you could take other people's suffering on, that would be really great.
That was my question, Don. So then from there, can you expound on that just a little bit? Because I've heard a little bit about
Sure.
that. Why would they say it would be great to have incredible suffering?
No, to take others' suffering
Well,
on.
yeah, for real, I get that part. But to take on somebody else's suffering, but then to take it a step further, I've also heard in the studies here, even to like experience great suffering in this lifetime is actually, it's almost like the lamas would be like, congratulations, like, even, do you know what I mean?
Well, I do. I'll give you a sidebar to that.
Sidebar.
Yeah. For example, when we suffer, if I'm going to hit John up for this one. So, John, when you suffer, what are some of the positive attributes of suffering?
It definitely helps me see the similar suffering in someone else. And compassion can naturally arise from that. Whereas otherwise I might really have to sort of coerce the compassion if I'm trying to do that.
Right. So potentially, suffering could, obviously the more we understand suffering and the depth of suffering in ourselves, the more access we have to developing compassion. If we just think life is a bowl of cherries and blah blah blah, then we shut ourselves off to hardship and suffering. There's not much to draw on when you want to develop compassion. But some other aspects of suffering that are good. For example, the Tibetans. Well, this friend of mine, her house burned down. She lived in the Bay Area. And her house burned down, and the Tibetan Lama said, "Fantastic! Oh my God, that's like amazing! You burned up all of this negative karma. That's like one of the most amazing things, because there was, in other words, you had to let go of a lot of things when your house burns down. But they saw having your house burn down as purification." Because negative karma was ripening and it was finished. For example, and I remember talking to people who were in the early 1960s in Dharamsala, when the Tibetans had just come in from Tibet. They'd escaped. The first group that came there, and they were living in squalor, and there was nothing there. And the people had headaches and a lot of physical ailments and stuff, and their attitude about headaches was that's purification. Like, wow, a headache, great, I got a headache. It's like I'm purifying negative karma. We don't think of suffering as being that way. We think of suffering as something to be absolutely in any way possible to be avoided. And since it cannot be avoided, what a wonderful attitude to have about it is when you're sick. I mean, I deal with people a lot that are sick. And then when you add, I hate sickness on top of sickness, you got double suffering. But and I'm gonna say it's easy to do, but to see it like almost like a gift from the guru, an opportunity to learn, but it's also an opportunity to finish the negative karma. The karma's ripening for illness. That karma's ripening is done. You know, I recovered. Hopefully I did. Maybe you didn't, but you recovered. It's like purification.
Oh, Don, John online reminds us that suffering can be the ripening of past karma.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It is the ripening of past karma, and when it's finished, it's finished. So it is, in a way, it's like purification, but without the four opponent powers, that we talk about when we intentionally want to do purification. But the karma's finished. When the karma's finished, it can no longer cause any suffering. It's like burning a karmic seed. It can no longer yield, a plant. Okay, so let's do the refuge and bodhicitta prayers, and then we'll do some Tonglen practice.
That's page 34 for those of you in the Kadampa. Let's see if I can get it up here for those of you online. Hang on just a second.
So I gave a little commentary the first class about refuge and bodhicitta. You remember we talked about how the first two lines distinguish Buddhists from non-Buddhists, and the second two lines distinguish people who practice the Mahayana, the great vehicle, versus the individual vehicle, or Hinayana or Theravada. All right, so anyway, and then the four immeasurables. What are those immeasurables? They're immeasurable love. May all sentient beings have happiness in its causes. Remember, that's the definition of love. Now, when we say the words, it's not enough to just say the words, is it? People think compassion are these, or love is these words. These are not. It's not love. Love is something that we actually feel. And the way I try to explain it to myself anyway is if the way I feel when I'm with someone that I really dearly love, if that feeling could speak, it would say, may you have happiness in its causes. And the same way with compassion. May all sentient beings be free from suffering in its causes. So that's the definition of compassion in Buddhism, isn't it? But that's not compassion. It's just mere words that are pointing in the direction of when we experience the feeling of compassion, the words that compassion would likely say. And then the next verse, may all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. Well, that's kind of a weird one, but it's considered to be great joy. Okay, and then the last line, may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hate for enemies. So that's equanimity. Again, key component to developing universal compassion. Because if we're biased, and again, our goal in Mahayana, again, it's not for everybody, is it? That's one of the things that's made real clear is Mahayana motivation is not for everybody. And we don't need to be, but it's something that takes time and effort, and certainly a karmic connection with this attitude of striving to become the best version of ourselves. Why? So we can help others. So again, a big part of that is developing equanimity, because we don't want to exclude anybody. All right, so then those are again, explanation of the, so we'll do refuge, bodhicitta, four measurables, and then maybe we'll do the seven limb and the mandala, just to plant the karmic seeds, and then next week the last class will talk about seven limb prayer a little bit too. All right, so I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And then the mandala offering. It's always good if you have something to offer. Like if you have a mala, this doesn't really qualify, but it's close. You could actually have jewelry or anything you could put in your hands. iPhone would be good, yeah. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratnam Mandala Kamniyatayami. Okay. So here we are, moving along. So we're gonna let's start out by doing start out by doing the 9-round breathing to settle your mind, and then we're gonna practice Tonglen. I'll talk you through again doing it just for yourself, because again, when you do Tonglen, it's important. I think it's important to start with yourself, and then you can expand it, as we talked about, to close people, and then friends and family, and maybe a community, and then strangers, and then eventually people that we might ordinarily feel aversion toward. But start out by doing the 9-round breathing. You can do this a couple of times. So imagine yourself in human form, and when you do visualizations like this, usually at the level of the forehead, a body length in front, and as big as you can envision yourself to be. Doesn't have to be little tiny. It could be big, like a hologram, completely made of light. And actually, not just dead and inert, like a statue, but actually, you can imagine yourself as the living, breathing presence of yourself. And as you breathe out, you imagine that your body is full of this really wonderful, joyful light. And out your right nostril, gradually you imagine that all the things that you want and need, okay, all the way up to the teachings and realizations of the teachings, all the way up to supreme enlightenment. Imagine as you breathe out this light which symbolizes all of these things, and along with it are can whisper the words silent to yourself. May I have happiness and its causes. May I have happiness and its causes. You can say it multiple times, and again, you imagine that white light enters your left nostril, the you in front of you, completely filling your body with this joyful white light. Okay? And you actually receive happiness and its causes. So we'll do that first for a moment. And you imagine that you've actually received that white light has completely filled your body, and you've actually received that which you've been sending. And then, like we usually do, you imagine that all the suffering, particularly your future suffering, right up until the moment of your death, but also you can work with past suffering as well. All of that in the form of black smoke kind of rises off your body, and then you slowly breathe that in. It can come in multiple breaths. Take as much time as you need. And then when it gets right, you let it coalesce sort of in an orb of darkness. And you get it right to your nostril, and then you take one breath, and it goes right into your body, and like a bolt of lightning, destroys this rocky mountain of self-cherishing, and it disappears instantly, and your body's completely filled with joy, which is the result of compassion, isn't it? So again, along as we're breathing in the suffering, this symbolic suffering of black light, we imagine, may I be free of suffering and its causes. May I be free of suffering and its causes as it comes in, like that, and then you bring it in. So you do that for a few minutes. And as that orb of that rocky mountain of self-cherishing is destroyed, feel your body sort of completely full of white, blissful white light. See if you can access that blissful feeling of having let go of the self-cherishing mind, and your body being completely full of this blissful white light. Now you can do this maybe 1 or 2 more times with yourself, and then we'll expand it a little bit. So again, may I have happiness in its causes, and then may I be free of suffering in its causes. So we're developing love, which we're the imprints, the habit of love and compassion. Love and compassion. That's what we're cultivating through this practice. And you can imagine some people that you feel particularly close to, that you would, say, this is somebody I love, I care about. And then again, send them the white light of love and take on the black smoke of their suffering into your heart to destroy your selfish, self-cherishing attitude. Another way to sort of add a level of dimension to this is to, and I'm quoting something that Jeffrey Hopkins, one of his, and he doesn't make stuff up. So this is coming from a text. I just don't remember which text it was in. But anyway, he talks about developing love and compassion, but to the level of a bodhisattva, right? So he says, so as you breathe out, maybe you imagine these people that you care about, and you go, as you breathe out, white light, the first time you breathe it out, you go, how nice it would be if they could have happiness and its causes. How nice it would be. And then the second time you do it, you go a little bit stronger, a little bit more, more oomph here. It's, may they have happiness in its causes, which is what we've been doing. May they have happiness in its causes as we breathe out the white light. And then the last one is kind of sounds a little bit, it may sound a little strange, but it's kind of the bodhisattva's attitude. I'm personally responsible for the happiness of all universal living beings. It's on me. So this last one is, I will cause you to have happiness in its causes. I will be the source, the cause for you to have happiness in its causes. Kind of like a bodhisattva vow. This bodhisattva mentality of taking universal responsibility for all beings' happiness. So I will cause you to have happiness in its causes. And then we can switch it around. Imagine again the suffering of these beings in front of us. And we think, may they be free of suffering and its causes. Again, this is compassion. May they be free of suffering and its causes. Sorry, let me back up a minute. First one is, how nice it would be if they could be free of suffering and its causes. How nice it would be if they could be free of suffering and its causes. As you breathe in, and then the next level is, may they be free of suffering and its causes. A little stronger, a little bit more intentional. And then again, it sounds weird when I say it, but I will cause you to be free of suffering and its causes. Again, this is the Bodhisattva's vow. It's the attitude of the Bodhisattva of taking universal responsibility for all beings. I will be the cause of you to be free of suffering and its causes. I will cause you to be free of suffering and its causes. Stronger and stronger, kind of more intentional, more purposeful, more responsible attitude of compassion. We'll do this a couple more times. Again, the first one is, how nice it would be if you had happiness in its causes. May you have happiness in its causes. I will cause you to have happiness in its causes. And then on the compassion side, how nice it would be if you could be free of suffering and its causes. May you be free of suffering and its causes. I will cause you to be free of suffering and its causes. So this is a practice that we could, like I mentioned this, that some great yogis, great practitioners, it's said that every breath that they take, once they've learned this practice, is they practice Tonglen with every breath. Every breath of for their whole lives, once they have been taught this practice. And I mean, how amazing. Like with every breath, you're cultivating love and compassion. Love and compassion. And standing in front of strangers, people you don't even know, and again, this practice is done secretly. You don't want to make a big show of it. It's something it's a mental practice. You could cultivate love and compassion to anybody. Again, you have to feel a connection. Again, it's really good to, if you want to do this practice in day-to-day life, it's very important to start out with an equanimity meditation where you're developing an equanimous attitude toward the three categories of beings, the friends that we feel attachment toward, and the loved ones and stuff like that, that we cling to and have sort of a craving attitude toward. And then the strangers that we feel indifference toward, which is the vast majority of beings, and then the beings that we feel aversion toward. And again, letting go of the aversion, the indifference, and the clinging, and trying to develop equal regard for universal living beings. They're all just like me. They want to be happy. Everybody goes about it in their own way, but in their heart of hearts, they want exactly what I want. Each wants the same. They want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. And if you can open up the windows of your imagination, in past lives, they've all been family. They've all been my mother. They've all been extremely kind to me. They've been in every potential relationship. It's we focus on the close ones, but this is not a meditation about love. This is a meditation about developing equal regard for all beings. Okay? And then from there, you can practice Tonglen with anybody. You can practice it with strangers on the street, with your loved ones, with the people that you just feel aversion toward. Ordinarily, you can practice with anybody. Very, crucial. It is probably the most important, and I think the most neglected practice in all of Tibetan Buddhism. At least that's my experience. But individual practitioners may have a very, committed, dedicated practice. Whatever experience you've generated, just hold on to the feeling. Maybe a little bit of love, maybe a little bit of compassion in your heart, and just allow your mind to rest in that experience. You can relax your concentration. So I want to make a distinction between empathy and compassion. Does anybody want to take that? Anybody have a comment about that? Are they the same thing? What's the difference?
Anyone online, if you'd like to comment, just unmute.
What is the difference between empathy and compassion? Or are they the same thing? Depends on how you define it, I guess. But, so, John, I'm picking on you today. So how would you define empathy?
I would define empathy as being able to feel the same thing someone else is feeling and understand it.
So kind of feeling with, or yeah, like
You know,
being,
identifying with them as if you're feeling it yourself.
yeah,
And then compassion would be wishing they were free from suffering.
right. There's even the definitions, these are Buddhist, well, they're compassion. I don't know how they define compassion in the, Webster's, but that's definitely a Buddhist definition. But the empathy definition is universal. It's like feeling with, or like I'm in your shoes, walk a mile in your shoes, and I know how you feel. Now, do I know how you feel? Not really. But I can imagine how I would feel if I was in that experience, like somebody's sick or whatever, or maybe they're having a good experience. But we're drawing on our own experience and projecting that onto this other person, and we imagine we know how they're feeling. Well, the reason I brought this up was, I mentioned this a couple of times. There was an article in Scientific American. It's a little controversial, so I'm trying to stir things up a little bit. I want to be a troublemaker. But it's actually, it's science. There was a guy named, it was in Scientific American around 2005. They had a whole issue on meditation. And there was this one section where they had John Davidson, who's a professor, scientist, probably, I think he's more psychologist than, yeah. But anyway, and Matthew Ricard, you know who that is? He's a Buddhist monk. I think might be a physicist or something like that, but he's Buddhist monk, and he's been practicing Buddhism for a long time, and quite, he's renowned. He's also very interested in how, to validate Buddhist experiences through meditation and through scientific experimentation. So what they did was, apparently, and in this article, they took a group of people and they taught them meditations. They're sort of guided. These were not experienced meditators, by the way. Let's just say they took a group of 20 people, two different groups of 20 people. One group, they taught them, they cultivated empathy. They taught them practices to cultivate empathy. And the other group, they taught them practices to cultivate compassion, which would be something like what we just did. May you have happiness and be free from suffering, like that. And what they noticed was that the people who had empathy, who cultivated empathy, they were more distressed, which was kind of, when I first read that, I was kind of surprised, but then started thinking about it a little bit. But when I've seen mothers, back in the day when I used to work in emergency medicine, I can remember mothers coming in and their children getting their lacerations stitched and had to numb them up. I mean, the mothers were like, it was like I was sticking a needle in them, They felt so connected to that child that the baby's suffering was their suffering. I mean, it's so powerful, that empathy. But again, empathy apparently causes it causes distress in the mind. Whereas compassion, when they looked at the people who cultivated compassion, it was completely positive. It was something very positive. And so, and then they went on to spin it a little bit, and they talked about how there's like a burnout rate, particularly in the helping professions, like medicine, like that. The burnout rate was like 60%, maybe more, but it was pretty high. And they think that the part of the reason was that these people were very high on the empathic scale. you know? Whereas in Buddhism, we try to cultivate, you know, I mean, I think, for example, in a relationship, it'd probably be really important to have empathy. It's not like empathy is all bad, although I did read a book called The Problem with Empathy by this Yale professor named Bloom. I got really interested in that subject because I thought, how could empathy be bad? But he talks about a lot of problems with empathy, but there are situations where it being, you know, if you're in a relationship with somebody, it's pretty important to get a feeling for where they're coming from and what they're experiencing. So it's not all bad, but there's a lot of problems with empathy. Burnout being one of the biggies, whereas compassion is what we're trying to cultivate, which is totally positive, you know, totally a good thing. So anybody want to take a swipe at that? Any thoughts about it? Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I sort of think about it as empathy being connected to a power source, and then compassion being knowing what to do with the power. Like if it's just empathy, it might be like touching an electrical socket. You know, you don't know what to do with that electricity.
Yeah.
Whereas compassion is a wish to do something.
Right.
So it seems like if you have both, then empathy would sort of trigger the compassion, and compassion would be doing something about it, which might sort of occupy your mind instead of, you know, the distress, when your mind would start having narratives in it, so forth, like you're sort of controlling the narrative.
Right.
Instead.
Yeah.
So when somebody,
Oh, sorry.
okay, so when someone's gone through something challenging in their lives, and because of that challenge or adversity, they're able to, when they witness that happening for somebody else in their life, maybe something similar. Let's say they go through a trauma, and then later in life they meet somebody that's gone through something similar. They have a direct experience of empathy with that person because they know actually what that feels like. Had they never gone through it, they may have a disconnect to that empathy and possibly a disconnect to their compassion. So I think sometimes empathy, if used correctly and with some mental discipline around it, can actually fuel or be fodder for deep compassion. If you've been through what somebody else has been through, almost like as a precursor, but I can see some mental boundaries needing to be established there within one's own mind so that they don't get overwhelmed. I like what John said, like with that power source of empathy, like you can get easily completely distraught, and maybe I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have been on a ventilator in an intensive care unit to actually, you know, if we have been and we see somebody on there, we're going to feel really strongly, you know, there's going to be more empathy, but it's not necessary for compassion to actually have been there, but it could be a catalyst for stronger compassion, is what you're saying, but it's not necessary.
Correct. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
But I wonder sometimes if some people, I don't know. I wonder sometimes about myself. If I wasn't born into this world where maybe I would have had less compassion for people. And sometimes I wonder if some of the things I went through was to spark my compassion and to help me have a more open heart and mind.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it has helped.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm thinking of it in terms of like Tonglen practice, right? So, in order for me to understand the suffering that others have, I have to understand a little bit about what their suffering is. So, say someone has cancer, I would need to know something about cancer. You know, maybe not a whole lot, but in order to be, I think for me to be totally take that on, I try to like understand the level of suffering someone may be occurring, so that then I can take it in. right? And then, you know, using the compassion aspect to send, you know, the lovingness back out. So, I mean, for me, it's easier for me to identify with people that I have an understanding of what their affliction is. For instance, if it's mental health issues, there's a lot of that I can't really understand because I've never experienced it. Like I wouldn't know what it's like to see something that's not actually there and have conversations with people that aren't there. But I understand that there's an affliction that's occurring in the individual, and that's what I try to identify with the affliction, so that when I'm doing Tonglen for them, I'm taking on the affliction as I understand it. You know, and so when they say it's good for us to take on the suffering or to have suffering, well, sure, because if we don't understand it, how are we ever going to help it?
Yeah. This is a kind of a little sidebar to this conversation. I had and I've heard this before, but there's one teacher we had came through here, and he said, and he's a Western teacher, and he said that it was kind of a radical thing. He said he liked to say radical things, but he said he didn't know anybody who was really a serious practitioner, Buddhist practitioner, who literally hadn't had their teeth kicked in. In other words, had hit the bottom and, you know, at least seen it. You don't necessarily have to go there, but at least has had some major kind of wake-up call. It's a little bit like AA, you know. I mean, when people you hear about like you gotta, you know, a lot of friends. I have friends that have been in AA, and they say that people have to hit the bottom. They have to hit the wall of the bottom before they'll wake up. And we talk like that way in Buddhism. I mean, renunciation is is basically taking looking at the situation we're in, which is dukkha, and coming to, and really being honest about it. So we got to look at our own experience with honesty, and then have this determination to be free. Right? That's renunciation, right? So I thought that was pretty powerful. He didn't know anybody. He knew a lot of Buddhist practitioners, but he didn't know anybody who was really, really serious, who didn't have that had a serious practice that hadn't had a major dose of suffering in their life. And I think that does help us become more compassionate, because then we understand that that's what everybody's experiencing. It's not just us. And that's kind of a form of empathy, but it's just reality. It's just being honest. Hey, we all experience birth, sickness, aging, and death, right? Those are the the Buddhist Four Noble Truths, and then he talks about the truth of change. We cling in a world that's always changing, so we're going to suffer. That's the suffering of change. Even pleasurable experiences, things that we spend our life in constant pursuit of, food and any kind of sensory input that brings us a little relief that we label pleasure. We spend our whole life, but it's so fleeting, and we're left like having like we've been drinking salt water. We're thirsty for more. We're never satisfied. Lama Zopa said, biggest suffering in all of samsara is that suffering of never being satisfied. It's like low-level radiation. We don't even acknowledge it most of the time, but it literally kills our spirit. And then of course there's pervasive suffering, which is like, the wheel of samsara. We're caught up in this whole process of uncontrolled causation. We have no clue what tomorrow's going to bring. We have no clue. We know, but if we're honest about it, it will bring suffering. I mean, that's what most of our life is about. We don't think of it that way, and the word suffering may be too harsh, but it will bring dukkha, which is unsatisfactoriness, and all the different, nuances of that word. Anyway, did you have somebody?
Yeah, Naga has a question or a comment, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, I had a comment, probably a question. If I'm saying that I want to be part of their happiness, be the cause of happiness, I feel like instead of saying general happiness, I would like to say virtuous happiness. Because then if I'm saying happiness could be many things for different people. I could be driving them to bar, I could be hosting party, they drink. So I feel like I want to change that. Instead of general happiness, I want to say virtuous happiness. May I be the cause of their virtuous happiness. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, I think that's good. And it also brings up a point, I think, is that a lot of times we equate happiness with pleasure, don't we? Some sort of pleasurable experience, which, it does bring us happiness in the moment, but the moments are fleeting. And again, the point is, that's not what we want. In our heart of hearts, we want lasting. This is the Buddhist angle. We want lasting happiness. We want something that can't be shaken, that's joyful. We want that's the happiness of a Buddha. It's joy, there's freedom from all the afflictive emotions. That's nirvana. That's what an arhat's experience is. So, yeah, it's a good point. Thank you. Bring that up. So we're trying to pay attention to the time. I'm not going to keep us here way over time. Try not to keep us here. But let's read through, because I talked about and we can go back and revisit the 8 verses next week, but I want to let's just read through the text on the 3 principal aspects of the path, because this class is about presenting the path. And the 8 verses are a great way to sort of use this information. But if you don't understand the 3 principles of the path, if you don't understand renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness, then the 8 verses don't have much teeth to it. They don't make a lot of sense. So we'll read this together. And again, this is to just create imprints in our mind. I hope I have the same. I'm reading this one off Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, but I think it's the same one. And I'll stop and say a few words.
That's page 141.
Yeah. All right. So it says, I bow down to my perfect gurus. And then the promise to compose. There's all, the commentaries about each one of these lines, but we won't do much tonight. The essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, the path praised by all the holy victorious ones and their sons, the gateway of fortunate ones desiring liberation. This I shall try to explain as much as I can. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa. Promising to compose something that will help us. And then, and then persuading people to listen. Remember the 3 kinds of pots, students? What are the 3 kinds of pots?
Crack. There's a crack. has a crack, one has a hole, and then one is already full. Is that right?
Well, that's not exactly well, the different ways. I've heard it different ways, but one is that the pot is upside down. So closed-mindedness, you're not going to learn anything, right? And then the other one is like a pot with a bunch of holes in it. You hear the teachings and they just kind of go right through you. And the other one is a pot that's dirty. And what that means is you got all your preconceptions and stuff like that that are polluting the teachings. That cover the basics, John. So those are the so we need to listen, but listen not in those ways. But those who are not attached to the pleasures of circling in samsara, the cycle of uncontrolled causation, who strive to make freedoms and endowments meaningful. So that's the pressure. Freedoms and endowments are referring to I think it's the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. But they're basically talking about precious human rebirth, precious life. Those who make freedoms and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones. That's the Buddhas. You fortunate ones, listen with a calm mind. And then the next line is the purpose of generating renunciation. Without the complete intention, definitely to be free from suffering, there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. So, again, you got to have, and this is the hardest part of the path. But without this, there's no path. Because we've got to have a determination to be free. I mean, I've heard people say it's like if your hair's on fire. It's like, I got to be free. That kind of sense of urgency, realizing that we have a big problem, and then wanting to be free from the suffering and all that. And again, what's the best way to keep somebody in jail, to keep somebody from breaking out of jail? I mentioned this the other week. What's the best way to keep somebody in jail? Yeah.
I'm not sure if I exactly remember, but it was almost to help them, make them think they're not even in jail.
Exactly. If we don't think we're in jail, we have no interest in escaping. If we don't see samsara as a prison, then we'll just go through our lives, as long as Yeshi said, and our life will be meaningless. From, again, Buddhist perspective here. So really important. So how to generate renunciation. So these are the first 2 lines, the first little part, and I've used this myself because I love this part. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. So freedom and endowments has to do with precious human rebirth. Remember, we're free from all that negative stuff, like being born in an irreligious country, or being a heretic, or having no interest in the Dharma, or being born in one of the joyless realms, and so on, and having imperfect senses. And endowments are being born at a time when the Buddha taught, having all the faculties, having an interest in learning at a time when they're living teachers who can transmit the Dharma, and that we have the leisure and fortune to be able to practice it. Those are the freedoms and endowments. Does anybody get many of these calls? I am so tired of them. I should have muted this thing, but I think I'm on call. Anyway, so precious human rebirth. So freedoms and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. What is that about? Death and impermanence, right? Death is definite. It's going to happen to all of us. So we got to come to grips with that. Death is definite. So I must practice the Dharma. because I'm going to die. And then time of death is indefinite. It could be any moment. It could be the next breath. Could be a blood clot right now in your heart, going to your brain, stroking out, dead as a bud. It could happen any moment. A sense of urgency. All right? Death is definite. I must practice the Dharma. The time of death is indefinite. I must practice now. And the only currency, the only thing of any benefit at the time of death are the imprints, the spiritual realizations that we have in our heart of hearts. That's the only thing that's going to help us on our deathbed. Not our money, not our friends, not our family. They could be huge obstacles to a peaceful death. So again, this is how we develop renunciation. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. Precious human rebirth. And life has no time to spare. Death and impermanence. Gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life are reversed. So precious human rebirth and death and impermanence. That helps us turn our mind away from just the happiness of this life. And the next two lines are turning our mind away from the happiness of future lives, thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying. That's karma, right? Positive leads to positive actions. Right, John, this is a quiz. What is a virtuous action? How do we determine a virtuous action in Buddhism? John knows this one, I think.
Virtuous action is one that leads to your own happiness in the future. It becomes the cause of the happiness.
Yeah. So, but we can't always see the future. But if the action causes happiness in the future, it was virtuous. But in the moment of doing an action, how would you know whether it's virtuous or whether it's going to lead to long-term happiness or suffering? How would you know? What would you have to be aware of?
Karma.
Well, this is the definition of karma. But what you'd have to know, what we need to be aware of is that any action motivated by I don't want to say that, greed, hatred, or ignorance, 100% of the time is going to lead to suffering. Any action motivated by non-greed, non-hatred, non-ignorance, 100% of the time is going to lead to happiness. So that's why it's so important to be aware in the moment of our motivation, because it's a key factor in karma, right? And then, karma's so positively, and then karma's expandable, and then anything that we experience is the fruit of our former actions. That's a Buddhist worldview. That explains everything. That we are ultimately responsible for our whole life and everything that we experience in it, even though we don't quite understand that. Because it's only a Buddha really understands the full depths of karma, and then karma's never lost. So that's what that's about. And then repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. So that's the first noble truth, isn't it? That we just talked about. Birth, sickness, old age, and death. Things don't last. Meeting leads to parting. High position leads to low position. All composite things must separate into their parts. We must be born again and again and again. We must die again and again and again. I remember Jeffrey Hopkins gave the example. He said the number of times we've died is kind of, if you need a visual here, the number of times we've died, the skeletons of our former lifetime would dwarf Mount Everest. We've been born and died that many times. Would dwarf Mount Meru too, countless times. So again, this is remembering karma and dukkha because we spend 24/7, our actions are motivated by self-cherishing. So we're constantly creating negative karma, which will ripen in suffering. So that's to help turn our mind away from the happiness of a future life, okay? So that's how we develop renunciation. And that is the first step in the path. First step in the path. So it's time to wrap it up. Again, I'm gonna, we'll do the best we can, but I don't want to burn people out, and I think it's good to finish on time. So we got plenty to talk about next week. Yeah, so let's do our dedication verses. What page is that?
Depends on which dedication.
The Shanti Devas, what is it now?
246.
246 in the book. Okay,
The male beings everywhere, is that the one?
yeah.
That's page 32.
All right, well,
Yeah.
there's two of them then. Master Shanti Deva's buddy, is it the same one? Oh, good. All right. All right. And okay, this is our dedication. Now, what does dedication mean? I like to think of dedication is we've created some virtue, we planted some positive seeds, and now we want those seeds to ripen in something more than, and I'm not joking, because positive karma that we create that doesn't go dedicated to, something really amazing like enlightenment, it gets used up in like new cars and vacations and stuff. But we want these karmic seeds to ripen in our future enlightenment so we can help all beings, right? So this is where we're sending these karmic seeds into this ocean of bodhicitta and enlightenment. It's just one or two drops, but that's how you get there. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness enjoyed by virtue of my merits. May no living creature commit evil or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid. May those bound be freed. May the powerless find power. And may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Amen. So thank you, those of you who are here tonight. And your practice this week, I think, reading through the three principal aspects of the path and the 8 verses, and doing some contemplative meditation on those would be a great preparation for the last class, which is next Monday. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. We'll see you next
Thank
week.
you.
Last class, as Don said. Good night.